Liz Truss's fantasy that there are secret conservatives and that this is part of her popular conservatism mission alongside Jacob Rees-Mogg is, I'm afraid, so deeply mistaken as to be laughable. She's been laughed out of office once, and she should be laughed off her public podium again and again. It's not just the ridiculous arm gestures. I know I go on about these arm gestures and the need for hand exercises and practice. I try to practice. I started animating again today, and I had a good day's animation, and now my arm aches, and I realize I've still not got rid of the repetitive strain injury and the sort of carpal tunnel problems. And if anybody has any great ideas about how you do that, I'd be very grateful, because it's painful, and I hate not being able to draw, and I hate not being able to create things and being sort of forced into a corner. Incidentally, I also hate, by the way, the sort of trolling, the doxing, the people who send me intimidating messages. I had a whole series today, and I think, well, put it into perspective. You know, today is both a bad day and a good day. Today is a day when the king faces up to the reality of dealing with cancer, but at the same time there is a reunion with his youngest son, and there's every hope for reconciliation with between Harry and William, and I hope that takes place. I hope this is now the opportunity for some positivity. And back to Liz Truss, she said it's time to listen to voters and return to traditional conservative values. Well, traditional conservative values on things like immigration, climate change, and state regulation. In terms of immigration, it's about being fair, and it's about being honest. And keeping people in hotels is neither fair nor honest. The hostile environment invented by Theresa May is not a conservative concept. It's a form of oppression. Conservatism is about freedom, and it's about personal responsibility. And keeping people in hotels is neither. Climate change is, again, about responsibility for ourselves, responsibility for others, responsibility for our environment, protecting the environment so that it can be handed on to others. That is a conservative value. That is part of the conservative concept. It's also, I think, part of the Labour concept. State regulation and conservatism is about pulling back state regulation, so I don't understand how we've got to a position where we've got more regulations than we've ever had. And pulling back from Brexit has actually increased the regulations that we've got, because we've not only got the regulations that we had before Brexit, we've also got all these extraordinary regulations which are fencing us into our tiny island and emphasizing the fact that this is a tiny island. So she's right. She's right from that point. But I suspect her proposals about changing that will be different to mine. My proposals would go back to probably the 1970s, and to the thoughts of Norman St. John Stevens and maybe even the first cabinet of Mrs. Thatcher, the first two cabinets of Mrs. Thatcher, where I think there were conceivably conservative values. I think one could even go back possibly to Ted Heath's government, though I shudder at the thought. Thatcher, milk catcher, or what, milk snatcher, that's it. But that idea of oppressing the poor, oppressing the needy, that isn't a conservative value. That's about control. And conservatism is not about control. Conservatism is about law and order. Conservatism is about good government and about handing on what we've got to future generations. I think in many ways the present Labour Party shares many of the older instincts of conservatism. Truss has blamed her colleagues for trying to be popular at dinner parties. She's blamed them for what she calls wokeism. Well, popularity and wokeism are not necessarily the same thing. But keeping an eye on the PR companies, that isn't conservatism, that's celebrity. And we don't elect our MPs to be celebrities. We elect them to do a job. I think that's something that, unfortunately, Liz Truss has also forgotten. And Lee Anderson argued that Britons care little about hitting net zero carbon targets. Net zero is an understanding, a solution to the climate change problem. It's not the only solution. And do Britons care little about hitting net zero carbon targets? Maybe they do. But they care a great deal, I think, about passing on a better world to tomorrow's generation. And the net zero carbon targets were one solution to that. Abandoning it, fine, but produce an alternative, Lee Anderson. Because this negative campaigning, this carping, is not helpful. And to see the person that you've got as a figurehead, Liz Truss, this Thunderbirds doll, who cannot control her hand gestures, this is... we're supposed to be inspired by this. I'm not inspired except to ridicule, except to laugh. Liz Truss has urged the government continually to cut taxes, to disregard net zero commitments, to increase the retirement age from its current age of 66. But these are very specific changes that she wants. She's out of the business of specifics. She's had high office and she flunked it. She's now in the business, or she should be, in the business of wise advice or general pronouncements. She's not doing that because she still doesn't know her job or her place. And nor does Rees-Mogg. Rees-Mogg has opted to become a television personality, not a terribly good interviewer, I notice. I've always thought he was quite good at delivery, but he delivers best when he's on his own. He's not terribly good at interviewing, particularly people he doesn't agree with, because he tries to talk over them. And he thinks that by keeping this calm voice, he's generating the idea of a lack of bias. I'm afraid that's not the case. It just comes across as creepy. And so, is this popular conservatism? No, that's a misnomer as well. This is more right-wing guff.